Hey, good evening. Josh here with Patriotic AF. Typically, when I do videos like this, I like to sit down and talk about opinions, things that are going on in the news or current events. However, I'd like to take some time to talk about my personal experience this evening with something I've fought for a long time. And despite the veteran community and kind of the things that have been changing over the last 5 or so years regarding PTSD and TBI and all those things, one of the topics of discussion and things that we don't really hear much about is people who deal with depression. And this isn't necessarily just vets or folks who've deployed or law enforcement or any type of civil service like that. This is for everyone. And I'd hopefully like to share some of my experience as well as maybe offer a little bit of advice. So, for those of you who aren't familiar with depression, uh, a lot of people think that it's kind of one of those things where a person is depressed, they're down on themselves. Uh, a lot of times it's associated with suicide or hurting yourself or something of that nature. But that's not necessarily always the case. There are people who out there who deal with and fight, like myself, who deal with and fight depression almost on a daily basis, and it may not show at all. Like you can have a guy like me who's, you know, outgoing, outspoken, seems happy all the time, energetic, uh, usually a lot of humor, who still fights and deals with the same type of depression, but the difference is they do a really good job of either pushing it down and ignoring it, bottling it up, or hiding it, or both. Um, and excuse the loud squeaking from my chair, but so for me, uh, depression has been kind of something that I've had to face not just since my time serving the military and after that deployed as a contractor and dealing with the things that I dealt with then, but it's something that I've kind of fought and dealt with almost my entire life, basically since my adolescent years. And one of the things that I found for me is that, and it's not until recently that I realized that this is something that that depression is actually what I'm facing. But I'll go into periods of time where I'll become antisocial. I'll lose all motivation and drive to do things, and I'll want to shut down and kind of just zone out. And when I was younger, one of the outlets that I had to deal with that depression was playing video games. Because the great thing about playing video games is you have the ability to just sit, zone out into a completely different world, not pay attention to anything that's going around you, but still be active and doing something, keeping your mind busy, so you're not just sitting there. Right, so it's almost an excuse not to get out and go do things. And for a while there, especially during my early 20s, it became almost an addiction where if I wasn't at work or doing something that I absolutely had to be doing, I would just zone out and play games all day from the time I woke up until the time I went to sleep. And it got so bad that eventually I realized the impact it was having on my life and the things that it was causing with my relationship with my former spouse and my kids and all the things that I had going on around me. I was kind of like losing grip on, um, just letting my life go and not really becoming anything more than I was. Um, Now today, this is years later, and I've gotten past that addiction of playing video games, and I've gotten past a lot of that. And once I came to terms and realized like this is what I'm fighting, uh, my very first instinct was to seek mental help and become medicated. And for me, I have a family with a background of mental issues or mental health issues, and so it was almost like, yeah, that's what you need. So for a short period of time, I went through a phase where I was medicating that, And it almost was like, despite all the negative side effects of the medication and all the things that um, I had to deal with when taking those drugs, I was convincing myself this is something that I needed in order to break out of that cycle of fighting this depression that I was constantly undergoing. And so eventually I realized, like, one of the medications I was on, it was making me sleep like 12 to 16 hours a day. I would take it and literally be out. And then I would wake up and I would feel good and I'd be fine. But literally, you weren't waking me up from like 9 p.m. until, at least 9 a.m. the next morning, to the point where I was missing out on my life because I was spending all of my time sleeping. There were other drugs that I've taken that had made me feel just like a zombie, just completely groggy, like lack of all emotion. And so, I kind of broke into really becoming dedicated and working out in the gym. And that was one of the things that I found helped me to kind of feel good about myself and something to look forward to, an outlet for me to latch onto and continue to do and work towards. And I saw improvement and I was making gains and I was getting stronger and seeing results in my body. And it was almost like I started to forget about that depression. And despite even today me going through phases or periods of time, especially when I'm undergoing a lot of stress with different variables or obstacles in my life, I'll find myself starting to kind of fall down back into that mindset and fall back into that, downward spiral of depression. And so I decided to start to take a different look at it. And I started to realize that, despite all the conspiracy theorists out there and all the, political undertone I could make to this subject, is, drugs are a treatment to whatever it is that they're designed to treat, right? Like if you have pain, you take drugs, and it's supposed to be a temporary thing. Drugs should never be a permanent fix to a problem that you have, whether it's physical or mental. Those drugs are designed to help you cope with or cure whatever ailment that you have. And despite the taboo and kind of stereotype that falls behind mental health, we see folks out there with physical ailments every day who are accomplishing amazing things, right? With the release of social media and kind of how that's been out there, is you'll see videos of these insanely old people performing like incredible feats of strength or endurance, or you'll see amputees who are performing marathons or other types of Olympic sports. You'll have wheelchair bodybuilding. Like there's tons of folks out there who are physically disabled who are doing these amazing things, and people are like, wow, look at what this person has overcome. And the way that I started to look at it was, there's not a single person on the planet who isn't disadvantaged in some way. There's not a single person out there who doesn't have something that they have to overcome, or an obstacle, whether it be physical or mental or whatever the case is, that they have to overcome in order to be successful in their goals and what they want to accomplish in their life. And for some people who fight these things like depression, if you start to look at it like that, it's going to completely change your mindset when it comes time for you to pursue your goals. Yes, it's going to become that much harder to accomplish those things. Yes, it's going to be more difficult than the next guy who doesn't have depression or any other ailment. But you have to remember that next guy or that next gal, they also have their own internal struggles that they're fighting to overcome. So for me, I try to look at my depression as my little bit of a handicap. Now, obviously, I'm not going to put myself on the level of somebody who's actually mentally disabled, or actually has, an leg amputation, because they have more of an obstacle to overcome. However, this is my obstacle, and this is what I have to choose to fight. And that means that when it comes to my depression, I can't rely on my motivation or drive to do things and pursue my goals and accomplish them. I have to rely on discipline and character and perseverance and integrity and the commitments that I've made to myself in order to continue to pursue those goals and pursue happiness within myself and create a spiritual balance within myself where I can understand and recognize that that's something that I'm dealing with, identify it, be emotionally intelligent enough to recognize that those emotions aren't coming from a place of genuine truth of what's actually going on in my life, and overcome that depression and continue to pursue those goals through my discipline and integrity and character. And, not to speak too long on this subject, but for those of you out there, if I could just reach one of you and let you know that I'm not telling you to stop taking your medicine. I'm not telling you to stop undergoing the treatment that's being recommended by a doctor. What I'm telling you is that you can't rely on those things to make you better. They're never going to make you better. Being on lithium or whatever it is that you're taking, that is a treatment plan that's designed for you to take and undergo indefinitely. The only thing that's going to make you better is understanding what that is that's going on in your mind, being able to identify it when it's happening, and not ignore it, but face it. Stand up and be willing to become that person who is going to overcome those challenges and be better and stronger than those challenges. So for me, when I wake up in the morning and I know I need to go to work, or I need to go do this, or I have my kids, I need to take care of them, or I have to go to the gym, or I got to do whatever it is that I have on my plate for that day, and I sense that depression starting to creep up, I face it. I tell myself, no, you can do this, continue forward and drive on. And it all starts with when you're willing to execute that. They say this all the time out there, don't be a victim. But it's true. You can't be a victim to your own mind. You can't be a victim. You can't let this ailment control you. You have to overcome that and accomplish that feat every day and be willing to face it. And don't be a victim of, say, I have depression. It's not an excuse. It's not a handicap. Just like anything else, right? So that was my quick video on it. I guess the biggest takeaway that I have, the last piece that I want to put in there is, despite my advice on that, and despite me undergoing these same types of, the same type of pursuit, it's still something that I sometimes fail at, even today, after trying and using this method of growth and understanding for years, is I still fail. There are still days where I shut down. There are still days where I zone off, watch TV all day, or play video games. But I'm not going to let that define my next day. And then the last piece is, there are tons and tons of examples of celebrities and public figures out there who have committed suicide because of, what was claimed to be depression. And they seem to be the happiest, most successful people out there. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they're gone. One of the things that I would say is that for those of you who have your close friends, like, they're people who fight people who fight depression aren't always going to be upfront and open about what they face. People who fight depression aren't always going to come out and say, oh, I'm really depressed. Like, you need to keep your buddies in check and keep an eye on your friends and your relatives, and talk to them and reach out to them. Hey, are you okay? Is everything all right? And even if they say yes, they are, they might not be. But a lot of times, the folks who really deal with that on a deep level, just you asking is enough to help them move one step closer to overcoming that. So if you have somebody out there who who's going through a lot, they've got a lot of challenges and obstacles in their life, just take 5 seconds to check on them, shoot them a text. All right, have a good night.